just, I don't know whether this will make you feel any better or not, but when I started this whole business, I had never used a camera of any sort in my life. So I came from a background of zero knowledge on this stuff. So everything I've learned about taking pictures has come through my experience in taking photo finish pictures. So, I mean, the interesting thing about this is one of the reasons why I used this, and this is the same slide I used 3 or 4 years ago, right? I do this to give you some more confidence as well, because the picture on the right is taken by a customer, a high school customer in the U.S. The picture on the left is, and I can say this because they're not here, is taken by the company that times the World Championships, our partner in the UK. So it's not all about how much experience you have in the real world. It's also about how much you care about taking good pictures. So the factors I have on taking good pictures are resolution, and by resolution I mean very simply how many pixels there are in the picture. And these days with your little still cameras, everyone talks in terms of megapixels. With photo finish pictures, I tend to think of things in megapixels per second, right? Which is basically how many pixels you have vertically in the picture multiplied by how fast you're taking the picture. The second important factor is the factor that's the most important factor for photography. Any photographer will tell you this. It's light, and there's only so much you can do about it. It's more a question of how you react to it. Focus, of course. If you don't have a sharp picture, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between first and second. The location of your camera. And I'm going to do a touch at the end on how these days it can actually be a factor, the computer screen that you have, because it's fascinating these days how tiny they're making the pixels on computer screens these days. Okay, so when I talk about resolution, in my opinion, which is different than some people's, but from my perspective, there's no such thing as too many pixels in a picture. You can always zoom to a lower zoom level, but you can't zoom in and magically create pixels. Now the flip side of this is that your camera does have to have the speed and the lens, and your environment has to have sufficient light in order to make the picture look right in terms of the cycling images, round wheels, people that look normal and not too fat, too skinny, and things like that. And this is something that I'm very bullish on, and that is very unusual in a lot of pictures you'll see from cameras taken with competitive systems, which is just that the field of view should fill the pixels that you have. And one of the things that, again, one of the factors that I mentioned yesterday as far as the difference with cameras is that FinishLynx cameras have the ability to basically set the resolution to be whatever you want. I mean, if the right number of pixels for the application is 740, then you can set the picture to be 740 pixels high, whereas all the other systems have discrete values. They might give you, somewhere between 4 or 5 choices of image height, if that many. And so I have, when it comes to that aspect, I do have this spreadsheet, which some of you have seen before, and I'm going to, apparently there is a version of it on your USB key, I'm told. If there isn't, you can get it from Matt. This is the spreadsheet that I used when people ask me, what kind of lens do you need for a particular application? see down here, so these are for the different camera models. This will show you how many pixels, the maximum number of pixels you can get out of with different zoom levels on the camera. Right? So if you have a Fusion camera with flex, you can get up to that many pixels, et cetera, et cetera. And so all you do is, this is a static table. All you're doing is you're using these things as a guideline to fill in this number up here. So in the case, the numbers that are sort of filled in up here at the moment would be, for say a Fusion camera running in Zoom 100. Fusion cameras have, this is the pixel size, so you just fill those numbers in, and then over here, apparently, the screen is offset somewhat. The left side of the screen is not showing. So I'll draw it here. So this is my athletic track. So if I have a camera that's 7 meters high, that's my A dimension, and the camera. So let's say that the camera is on the very good. So that's my runner, and that's my runner in lane 1, and so it's 12 meters from the camera to lane 8, and then the finish line itself is 9.8 meters wide. The height of my person in lane 1 is 2 meters. It calculates that the lens that's required is a 69 millimeter lens, okay, which is within a typical range of the zoom lens that we provide in a package. But you may have a situation, if you have a situation with a customer that is, so let's say you're doing an indoor track, okay, and you have a situation where the camera is never going to move. They're going to permanently mount this camera, and it's never going to go anywhere. And it's 7 meters high, 9 meters back from the finish line. And let's say this is a sprint track, so there really are 8 lanes. Now you can see it's calculating at 51.7 millimeters. Okay? So in that situation, you're much better off supplying, rather than supplying the zoom lens that's in a package, supplying a 50 millimeter fixed lens. Because in the package, we've got now the standard Nikon lens in the package is a 2.8 to 4 f-stop, and basically you understand the f-stop is how much light the lens is going to let in, right? So a 50 millimeter f1.4 lens is going to give you the picture that you need, and it's going to be significantly more light sensitive. So the way So what I'm showing up there is basically for every f-stop, you get twice as much light. Right? So if you have a lens that's an f2.8 lens, and then you move to an f2 lens, you're going to get twice as much light, all other things being equal. And so if you can supply, in this situation, if you can supply an f1.4 lens, apart from the fact that it's going to be less expensive, you're going to get 4 times the light performance out of the lens that you will out of an f2.8 lens. As generally speaking, does that all kind of make sense? No? Yeah. So that brings me to the light discussion in general. Obviously, the first thing you can do to improve your light performance is get a faster lens. And when I say a faster lens, I mean a lens with an F number that's lower. And as I put it here, invest in a set if you're using F-mount. So a simple example that I would use is if you're a service provider, and you can buy a package and you have that Nikon lens, which is that f2.8 to 4 lens. It's a 24 to 85 millimeter lens. So you could keep that lens, and you'd have a situation where, regardless of where you use that lens in the range, the best case is you'll have 2.8, the worst case is you'll have f4. Or you could buy a set of 3 fixed lenses. You can get a 24 millimeter f2, a 50 millimeter f1.4, and an 85 millimeter f1.8. Obviously, buying those 3 lenses is going to be more expensive, but you have much more flexibility and much better light performance overall. Camera mounting location is obviously important when you're talking about light. Basically, all other things being equal, the light wants to emanate from a location that's similar to where the location of the camera is. Right? So what you don't want to be doing is you don't want to be shooting into light. Right? There's some situations in which you can't avoid that. But again, this is always about trying to do the most you can to improve the situation as best you can. The other thing that I show here, this little thing here is an example of a theater light that one of our customers uses to image just the area around the finish line. And that's one of the nice things about photo finish is that you don't need to put light on this big area around the finish line. You just need to put light on the finish line itself. The other thing that I kind of touched on a bit yesterday is this idea that all of the things being equal, the more pixels the light is falling onto and the larger those pixels are, the better light performance you get. And one of the advantages of the wide zoom modes is if it's not costing you anything else and you can use wide 50% or wide 33% or something like that, basically it's like you're creating larger pixels, right? Because you're taking adjacent pixels on the sensor, on the image sensor, and you're combining them. And what that does is it gives you better signal to noise ratio. It essentially is improving your light performance. And I always suggest, and it's not as much of a problem now as it used to be with some of the older cameras, but I always suggest that it does improve your images, it improves your light performance actually to have the image properly white balanced. And lastly, particularly when you get into desperate straits, don't be afraid to use the light filter. And when I say use it, I mean take it out if you have to. And if you have a Fusion camera, these days it can be necessary to actually put the filter into the position where you're actually cutting back on the light because the sensor is so light sensitive. But in low light situations, it's more important that you get a high quality image than it is that the color be perfect. And so what you find is when you take the filter, the little sliding filter on the front of the camera, and you move it to the low light position, basically what it's doing is it's removing the infrared blocking function from the camera. And what that does is it softens the colors. It makes the colors not quite as accurate, but it lets in a lot more usable light. And so that's something that I think everyone should consider when the light gets really bad. Focus is the next issue, and which is 2/3 of the way through the field of view, as opposed to, a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm gonna pick a point that's, you know, right in the middle because I want to, you know, I want to have the focus be as good as possible across the width of the finish line. The thing here to consider is that yeah, this is from the guy who says turn off your cell phones. The thing I was going to say here was that the near focus is easier than far focus. Okay. So, and I'll show you a couple pictures, and one of the problems with finding sample pictures to demonstrate some of these things is that the only pictures I keep tend to be good pictures. So it's very difficult to find pictures that people did things wrong on.
You should have asked me to send that.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a short track event, and I don't know whether it shows up very well on the projector, but yeah, you can sort of see. You can see how thin those lines are up there, right? That's pretty. The focus point. One of the nice things about this is that you can see how fine the lines are in this area. This is the ideal focus point here, and I know that's the end of the finish line, right? No one's going to finish inside of that line, right? I don't need the most important place I need to focus is right about in here. Right? And you can see I'm still getting reasonable focus out here, good enough, but you can see how it's getting soft out here. Right? It's kind of not nearly as sharp as it is up here. And the other thing you'll notice we'll get to in a second is that the effects of an object that's finishing closer to the camera than one that's finishing further away. The other thing I'm doing here is I'm adjusting my frame rate as well to make the object that's finishing in the common, you know, the area that's most likely for people to finish, the objects look more normal in better proportion. And the objects that are finishing closer to the camera in the location that's less likely for people to finish are more strangely shaped and not in as good a proportion. This I put in here because, and this is actually a PowerPoint picture. And this, I like to show good rowing pictures because this is one of the most difficult applications to take good pictures in because the finish line is so wide, for one thing. And the other reason is because, unlike in most of our applications, it's very difficult to test before the event happens, right? I mean, you can't ask someone to go and run through the finish line, right? So it's very common. We get so many pictures from customers in rowing who are just like, wow, my pictures are lousy, right? And we look at them and go, yes, you've diagnosed the problem correctly. Your pictures are indeed lousy. But, so it's very difficult. Oh no, my computer might be. So again, what we're looking at here is the nice thing about rowing is that they typically do have these bound numbers, right? So the bound numbers are the best thing to focus on once you actually see them coming through. So in this situation, you can see the quality of the focus on lane 2, and you can see, interestingly enough, the other thing you see the proportion of that number, and then you see the proportion of the numbers as they get closer to the camera, right? You see how the numbers start getting taller. See how tall that number is there, right? So, but at the same time, you're getting he's maintaining the focus across that whole field of view, and again, part of the way to do that is to keep that. You can see where it's tightest, where the number is most in proportion and the focus is tightest is in about lane 3, right? where to the extent you can. Also very helpful in indoor situations. Any situation in which you have difficulty getting focus across the field of view is to adjust your focus with the iris open. Basically, the goal there is if you can get the focus as good as you can with the iris open, then when you close the iris, the focus is just going to be that much better. So I probably didn't explain this very well, but as you close, if you have a lens, let's say you have an f1.4 lens, if you close it to f2.8 or f4 or f5.6, as you are closing the lens, or as the camera is closing the iris for you, your focus is getting better, your depth of field is getting better, and by depth of field I mean, the object that's far away from you is going to maintain focus, and while the object that's near to you is still going to retain focus. This is something that I suggest to people nowadays. Now, in the years since we've had this functionality, I always use this feature outdoors now, which is auto iris, which is different than auto gain. And so auto gain is the camera electronically adjusting. That's the gain number. So this number over here, right? That's the electronic gain. Okay. So that's the camera deciding, oh, my picture is a little too dark or it's a little too light. I need to move the electronic gain. Auto iris is, you can find that in here, in the camera settings, down here. Okay. And the nice feature of auto iris is that you basically, and it's, as anyone who's used FinishLynx cameras knows, that particularly if you've used cameras since the 5L100 days, these gain numbers are, so the optimal numbers are different for different cameras. It's not like a gain of 80 means the same thing for a 5L100 and a 200 and a 300, etc. But for a given camera, there is an optimal gain number. There's a number which, if you go above it, the picture starts to really degrade, and if you go below it, you're really sort of, leaving, the way I look at it is you're leaving field of view on the table, right? Because, you can close down the iris, let that electronic gain come up a bit, and you'll get the advantages of that better depth of field. And so that's really what the auto iris is about. So let's say that you think that for your camera, you would like the gain to stay between 50 and 100, which is the default numbers here. Then what auto iris will do is it will basically keep the lens as closed as possible and still maintain the electronic gain within that range. Okay? So it's just a way of sort of letting the camera, make sure that you're getting the best focus you can for the given light that's in the environment. Does that make sense? Everyone generally understand that? Shaking heads. Yes. Okay. There's the focus helper now, which I don't think I can demonstrate that without a camera attached. See if it even shows up. It's this thing here. And it's most useful in an environment where you have, so basically it's just a number that increases as you're adjusting the focus. The number will increase as the focus quality increases. And it can be particularly useful in environments where you don't have a lot of opportunity to test the focus before the event happens. Common thing is people they might test. They have their cameras set up, assuming the speed of the object that's actually going to be passing through the finish line, and then they'll test with an object that's moving much slower than that. The object will be fat, and they'll look at it and they'll go, oh, the camera's out of focus, right? Oftentimes pictures when the object is not properly matched, when the speed of the object is not properly matched to the speed of the camera, you know, out of proportion objects tend to look fuzzier. They tend to look out of focus. When they're not really out of focus, they're just not matched well to the speed of the capture rate. So, generally speaking, if you're going to be testing focus and testing it with objects that are not moving as fast as the real object is going to be moving at the race, then it's better to slow the frame rate down on your camera while you're doing that testing, that focus testing, and then speed the frame rate back up when you're actually going to do the race. I have go back to So camera location kind of ties together the three factors of resolution, light, and focus. And you don't always have in fact, often you don't have the opportunity to say, well, you know, I'm going to put this in the ideal location. But you do have the ability to, you know, given the location you have, to try to maximize the performance. And you know, there is no right answer to doing this, but one of the things that I think is useful to understand, and we talked about it in a little bit in that speed skating image, and I was going to show you an image from Matt's board here that kind of demonstrates a little bit of this. So here you have this image where the peloton is sort of coming along the rail up here, right? And so the vast majority of the bikes are finishing over here, okay? And you have all these sort of normal shaped bikes with, you know, an image from kind of a typical looking photo finish image for cycling, right? And then you have this guy sort of sitting down here, okay, kind of off on his own. And what you see here is that he looks entirely, he's almost on, you know, he's almost underneath the camera, right? So, let's say this is your cycling finish line, and this is your camera location. If you have to cover this whole track like this, right, that's your field of view. What's the taking good pictures problem with this situation? There's a number of them. But the worst one is going to be a depth of field problem. Right? You have a huge depth of field problem in this picture because these objects here are so much closer than these objects out here. Right? It's going to be very challenging, particularly if you have any light issues at all. It will be very challenging to get objects in both these locations in focus. So what is a solution to this?
I don't know if they have the question, especially at the back, so can you repeat the question on the mic?
So, okay, sure. So what would be the solution to getting better depth of field out of a situation like this, rather than, you know, you have this situation where you have a very wide finish line and the objects nearer to the camera are very much closer than the objects further away. I think I heard it. Raise the camera. That's the right answer. And this will show you. Or use a second camera. Now that's the salesman over there. Use a second camera. But as you can see, these are Matt Square cameras. And what do? They raise the cameras. Now, and they have a second camera as well, so it's perfect. It's the ideal situation. And they have a camera on the other side of the finish line.
And again, I'm going to exaggerate this, but as you raise the camera, basically, the difference in distance between objects that are close to you and objects that are far away from you is less. And when that distance difference is reduced, then it makes the field of view, the depth of field issue less problematic. Now I did actually forget, I'll go back to this. You've all seen this picture 100 times probably, but I'd like to show it because this goes back to my initial point on resolution and why I feel like there's no such thing as too many pixels. So this picture was taken at, 4,500 frames per second and 2,000 pixels. Right. Most people aren't taking their athletics pictures at that rate. But it's nice to know you can. And you get very nice pictures, as you can see. And the difference between those two athletes is 2/100ths of a second. And it's obviously it appears to be quite a long way on the screen. The other thing that I had mentioned, which I'm going to show you now, I think. Yeah. So I do have this other spreadsheet that I use, which I will give to Matt as well. This is a much simpler spreadsheet. So this is a spreadsheet I use to tell me how, when people ask, oh, can you tell me anything about what computer I need or what computer I should use. I'm trying to move that over a little bit. So one of the things I've found with modern computers is that they try to jam a lot of pixels into a very small area. And the problem, when you have a FinishLynx camera and it's, the camera is capable of 500 pixels, 1,000 pixels, 4,000 pixels, whatever it is, those pixels are going to appear on your screen in that size regardless, and you really need to use the native resolution of the screen. You can set your monitor to be some other screen resolution, but then it just doesn't look quite right. It's better to, if you have a FinishLynx computer, if you're buying a FinishLynx computer for your customer or something like that, in my opinion, it's better to just make sure that the pixels on the screen are not too tiny, right? And so if you have a situation like this where, I just, as an example, all I'm doing here is I'm filling in the physical size of the screen, and unfortunately these are in inches. But, so if you have a 15.4 inch screen and the resolution is 1680 by 1050, then what it does is it's calculating the effective pixel size. It's how tiny the pixel is on the screen. So the way to think about it is, if you can take the same FinishLynx picture, and there's someone passing through the finish line, and they're either going to be that physically big on the screen, or they're going to be that physically big on the screen, right? And the bigger this number is down at the bottom, the bigger they're going to physically be on the screen, and the easier it's going to be to see who won, and the easier it's going to be to read their back number, and et cetera, right? So the goal here is basically, if I move this down to, say, 1280 by 768 or something like that, now that, pixel size has gone up to over 1.0, and I deem that as good. Okay. Let's see. So that's, I'd like to, before I move on, I'd like to see if anyone has any questions on the taking better pictures thing. And something else I'd like to talk about, but we'll start out by seeing if anyone has any questions on this part. Anyone? Bueller? Stretching over here. Yes.
Just to make a comment about the light, including the light contention line, that should be above and past the line.
Above and past the line.
Yeah, otherwise you get a shadow. You lose the edge of here and get the shadow. You have it above and past the line.
Not too far past the line.
No, not too far.
Right.
That way the shadow will be
Did everyone hear that? You're going to have lighting above and slightly past the finish line. Graham is all about lighting, of course, with horse racing. There's a lot more opportunities for creating better lighting than there are unfortunately, in our athletics venues.
Do you have any similar comments about filming at night?
Well, that's pretty much if you do it at night. You will need to, the lights need to be above the camera. Otherwise, if you have before the camera below, you'll end up with like a shadow haze behind the object. You'll end up with its own creating a shadow, and then you won't, because you're laying the lights in, you won't be able to actually distinguish the edge of the object.
The object is casting its own shadow.
Yeah, but by having it above and past, the shadow from the object actually disappears behind the actual object. So on the front edge, if you're on the back edge, it doesn't matter.
You might want to repeat that, because sometimes people can't hear what they're supposed to.
All right, so the last thing I wanted to do is not related to taking better pictures. It's something I wanted to do because I know this is actually the most favorite part that I remember from last time. This is where people get to complain or suggest features and functionality that they would like to see in FinishLynx, and other people get to either concur or say it's not a problem, or suggest that they have a way around it, or something like that, right? So I like to do this in a bit more of a open session, because then I get a little better sense of whether people actually, whether more than one person is having this problem, which makes it, frankly, more likely that we're going to do something about it. So there's two areas I'd like to talk about here, both the software and the hardware, because there's always that chance that we might be working on a new camera. And there are a couple of features that, for example, just get the juices flowing. There are a couple of features that Paul Lambert has asked for.
Can you take them out?
Did you say, can you take them out? What?
One of them.
Take
Take the variable length out.
the variable length out.
Yeah.
Variable length. Can you explain?
Well, if you got a horse, you draw a box around it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, and say that's the length of the horse.
yeah. Take it out.
Yes.
You don't like that feature, is what you're saying. That was a feature that Paul told us to put in, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. And you don't want it in there.
Let's make it hidden when you turn it
Make it hidden. Okay. Fair enough. Where'd my pen go?
It's loud.
Yeah. It's like, leave it in. I like that. Oh no, so the hardware things that Paul was looking for was, he would like in the next camera for the remote control cable to the lens to go away, basically, so that you don't lose it, or to have it just be built into the camera. So when you have a remote iris lens or whatever, it's just it just attaches to the front. Right? That's one thing. And of course, everyone complains about the fans. So the goal is going to be to remove the fans altogether. Next camera.
We get a level built into the new camera.
A level, yeah.
Even an electronic one.
Yeah.
On-off switch.
On-off switch. Oh, yes.
How about an LCD so you can set the IP address?
You want to set the IP address.
On the camera.
did you say, Federico? I started to write it and I got so many things. You didn't say anything?
Or how about a photo I input on the back of the camera to do syncs, so that way you don't need an external cable?
Photo I input on the camera itself. So one of the things that it'd be nice to figure out a way to integrate radio links so that you don't even, you just have an antenna on it or something like that. Anybody else? Yes? Oh, scroll up and down with the mouse wheel. Yeah.
How about a keyboard shortcut in the in and out buttons?
For the Zoom, you mean?
Yeah.
Isn't Zoom a... you can do that yourself. Yeah. So do you know how to do, how to create shortcuts yourself? Anyone want to see how to create shortcuts themselves? Okay, so
You might want to minimize your Lynx image and just drag it down a bit so that you see the whole screen. Because the moment it's clipped, you just make it slightly less than full window. No, the actual FinishLynx application, the FinishLynx application window, make it a little smaller than full screen. So,
like that.
and just drag it over so we can see. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Does everyone know how to get to the hidden settings?